What if one of America's closest allies suddenly turned its back, not with missiles, but with markets? What if the neighbor who shares your economy, your defense, your values, suddenly joined your geopolitical rivals? That's not some wild conspiracy or clickbait headline. It's unfolding right now. Multiple credible sources, including the Financial Times and high-ranking UN insiders, confirm that Canada is actively in talks to join BRICS, the global economic alliance led by China, Russia, India, Brazil, and South Africa. An alliance the United States has officially labeled a direct challenge to the post-World War II global order. This isn't just a policy shift. It's a potential economic divorce from the United States. The whispers started in backdoor diplomatic circles, but now it's a political earthquake. And the fuse that lit it? Donald Trump. Within days of returning to the White House, he signed an executive order slamming Canada with brutal tariffs, targeting lumber, steel, dairy, and tech. No warning, no negotiation, no diplomacy. Just pure economic aggression. On social media, he justified it with slogans, "America pays too much. We're done." But for Canadians, these weren't just words. They were a declaration of economic war. In Ottawa, this wasn't seen as negotiation. It was seen as betrayal. And that betrayal triggered something unprecedented. Prime Minister Mark Carney, known for his calculated diplomacy, responded with the boldest move of his political life: "We will seek new markets. We will not let our future be destroyed." That statement signaled a possible pivot not just away from the US, but toward the East. Toward BRICS. Toward a future where Canada is no longer America's economic sidekick, but a sovereign global player charting its own path. If this move goes through, it won't just realign Canada's economy. It could shatter alliances, weaken US global influence, and accelerate the rise of a new world order. This is no longer about trade. It's about power. And once that power shifts, there's no turning back. At first, Prime Minister Carney's remark about seeking new markets seemed like standard diplomatic posturing, a way to deflect from Trump's aggression without escalating tensions. But now, that comment looks more like the start of a tectonic shift. While Washington postured with confrontation, Beijing countered with diplomacy. Quietly but effectively, China opened channels of dialogue with Ottawa, offering not just trade deals but entire economic alternatives, infrastructure development, technological cooperation, and long-term investment plans. Meetings were held across neutral grounds: Singapore, Dubai, Shanghai, and finally Zurich, where, according to Bloomberg, a closed-door session lasted nearly 11 hours. The agenda wasn't vague. Energy, agriculture, AI, fintech, and most critically, settlements outside the US dollar. The BRICS question, which had previously been about observer status, took a dramatic turn. Sources now claim that Canada is weighing full membership. If that happens, it won't just rattle DC, it will redefine the very meaning of BRICS. No G7 or NATO country has ever dared cross that line. But Canada might. Washington isn't taking it lightly. The day after the Zurich leak, the White House issued a terse statement: "We are deeply concerned by any signals that allies may support anti-American platforms." Then came Trump, blunt as ever: "If Canada goes down that path, we'll crush their economy. No one trades with traitors." But the truth is, Canada has already started trading. Bilateral trade with China jumped 18% in June alone. A uranium deal with India is already active. Brazil's Petro has announced a Toronto office. And talks with South Africa on platinum and rare earth metals are progressing fast, all bypassing the United States. And then came the boldest move yet: Canada agreed to test trade settlements in yuan and rupees, signaling that the US dollar is no longer untouchable. That sent alarm bells ringing across Washington. In retaliation, Trump imposed an additional tax on all Canadian-manufactured vehicles, targeting Ontario and Quebec's automotive heartland. Within hours, market panic followed. Shares of GM Canada, Magna, and Linamar plunged more than 9% in a single day. The message is clear: this is no longer just a trade dispute, it's a power struggle. And Canada is no longer playing defense. As tensions escalate, Canada's internal dynamics are beginning to shift. Labor unions, fearing economic fallout from Trump's tariffs, are now demanding immediate countermeasures. And in closed-door meetings, Prime Minister Mark Carney appears more resolute than ever. His message: "We've spent too long in America's shadow. It's time to build our own axis." That's not just rhetoric, it's the voice of a country rethinking its identity. Within Canada's elite, there's growing consensus: the United States is no longer a guarantor of stability, it's a geopolitical liability. And in contrast, BRICS offers something the US can't: stability, predictability, and a vision of shared sovereignty. With its expanding investment platforms, a BRICS-led development bank, and an alternative system for settling international trade in national currencies, the alliance represents not just an economic opportunity, but a systemic alternative to Western dependency on the US dollar. For Canada, this isn't merely East versus West. It's about dependence versus independence. If the post-war myth claimed that G7 countries would never leave the dollar zone, that illusion is now cracking. Even a deeply integrated partner like Canada is showing signs of divergence. And it's not just behind closed doors. Symbolic shifts are happening in public view. At the recent Kazan Economic Forum, the Canadian delegation didn't sit on the sidelines. They held private sessions with China, Russia, and even Iran. Canada's finance minister openly explored partnerships around the digital yuan and proposed cross-border settlement platforms outside of SWIFT, the Western banking system long seen as untouchable. In Washington, this is being labeled betrayal. In Ottawa, it's being called realism. But the real danger for the United States isn't just losing Canada. It's the domino effect. If Canada, a G7 member and NATO ally, formally pivots toward BRICS, others may follow. In the UK, think tanks are now publicly exploring parallel trade lanes. In France, the political left has intensified its calls to end dollar dependency. In Italy, the Prime Minister recently hinted that Rome must remain strategically flexible in an age of new economic blocs. The unthinkable is now on the table. Canada may be the first Western nation to break the post-Bretton Woods consensus. Just 6 months ago, it was a fantasy. Today, it's the subject of official negotiation. History isn't waiting. It's already moving. And Trump? He's doubling down. Trump isn't backing down, he's escalating. His administration now plans to impose a crippling 35% tariff on all Canadian oil products, a direct attack on one of Canada's most vital export sectors. But Ottawa is hitting back hard. In a countermeasure with global consequences, Canada is preparing to restrict U.S. access to rare earth metals and nuclear fuel, two resources essential to both American industry and defense. And if that wasn't enough, Canada's delegation at the United Nations has abstained, for the first time ever, from voting on a US-backed resolution targeting China. Quietly but unmistakably, the political shift is accelerating. And the great irony? The United States is pushing its own allies into the arms of BRICS. The harder Washington squeezes, the faster the drift becomes. Trump wanted to make America great again, but in doing so, he may leave it isolated. BRICS, once dismissed as a loose alliance of loser economies, is becoming the gravitational center of a new global order. The upcoming BRICS summit this fall is already confirmed to include Egypt, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Argentina, and Thailand. But if Canada even shows up as an observer, it will be a diplomatic bombshell. And if Canada formally announces its intent to join? It will be nothing short of a geopolitical earthquake. The US will be cornered. Economic sanctions would backfire. Political pressure would fall flat. And a media campaign would only deepen the divide. What's happening now is almost surreal. A country once seen as the gold standard of Western loyalty may soon stand alongside China, Brazil, and Russia. This is no longer speculation, it's unfolding in real time. And unless Washington changes course, Canada won't be the outlier, it'll be the first domino. The Pentagon is already in emergency consultations, debating whether to increase military presence in the Arctic, fearing a strategic pivot. U.S. senators are calling for hearings on Canadian loyalty and even threatening to reconsider the NORAD Defense Pact. Markets are reacting fast, stock sell-offs are hammering companies tied to Canadian trade, agriculture, and high-tech. And in a chilling twist, an internal State Department memo reportedly warns of a potential dissolution of the North American economic space. For the first time in decades, a sobering truth is sinking in across Washington. If Canada joins BRICS, it won't just be a loss. It'll be the final proof, the American-led era is over.